Among the constellation of Christmas icons, few figures have travelled as far or transformed as profoundly as Santa Claus himself. From ancient legends whispered in the winter to glowing screens of modern blockbusters, Santa bears many names: Kris Kringle, Father Christmas, and has worn many faces, each one revealing something about the age that shaped him. And so in this special festive episode of WN Movie Talk, we will be looking at the evolution of Old Saint Nick on film. So grab a hot chocolate, settle by the fire, and join me on this journey through the history of this beloved festive icon. But before we start, be sure to like this video and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which Screen Santa warms your heart every December. Long before he donned the red suit and took flight across the silver screen, Santa Claus lived in the stories of sailors and saints, in the pages of poets, and in the imaginations of children gazing into snowy nights, hoping to glimpse a kindly spirit bearing gifts. Father Christmas, as we know him today, is a tapestry of many traditions. He emerges from pagan winter spirits, through St. Nicholas of Myra, the charitable 4th century bishop, from Sinterklaas carried across the Atlantic by Dutch settlers, and from the Victorian Father Christmas, a robed symbol of festivity and winter cheer. Over the 19th century, these strands intertwined and shaped further by Clement Clarke Moore's beloved poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," which gifted Santa his sleigh, reindeer and chimney-bound deliveries, and by Thomas Nast's illustrations, which granted him the North Pole, elves, and that familiar jolly silhouette. By the time Haddam Sundblom's Coca-Cola advertisements arrived in the 1930s, the modern Santa Claus that we know today, warm, red-suited and grandfatherly, had become firmly embedded in global culture. It was this richly layered figure that cinema inherited, and film, with its power to shape myth just as much as capture it, has expanded his image even further. Across decades, Father Christmas has appeared as a benevolent guardian of childhood wonder, a comedic everyman, a flawed hero, and an even darker figure drawn from older, wilder folklore. Each portrayal reflects the spirit, anxieties and imagination of the era that created it. As cinema took its first steps into the 20th century, filmmakers quickly discovered that Father Christmas was the perfect figure for showcasing early movie magic. With his ability to appear, vanish and travel impossibly fast, Santa became a natural subject for the trick films and visual experiments that defined the silent era. One of the earliest and most important examples is Santa Claus from 1898, a British short film by George Albert Smith. For audiences at the time, it was a tiny revelation, not just because Santa was on screen, but because Smith used pioneering double exposure and parallel action to make him seem truly magical. A couple of years later, George Méliès expanded on this idea of Christmas imagery with The Christmas Dream in 1900, a whimsical series of festive vignettes featuring angels, gifts, feasting, and briefly Santa himself at work. Méliès treated Christmas less as a cosy domestic moment and more as a stage for cinematic spectacle, using dissolved substitutions and elaborate sets to turn the holiday into a kind of filmed fantasy review. By the mid-20s, films like the silent short Santa Claus from 1925, directed by Frank E. Kleinschmidt, offered one of the first substantial screen portrayals of Father Christmas, showcasing elaborate sets, model work and snowy location shots. It presented Santa not just as a magical figure, but as a fully realised inhabitant of his own cinematic world. As the world emerged from the devastation of the Second World War, cinema began to reshape Father Christmas into something more grounded, comforting and culturally resonant. The Santa of this era wasn't just a magical visitor, he became a symbol of reassurance during uncertain times, and increasingly a figure entangled with the growing commercial landscape of Christmas. Nowhere is this shift more beautifully realised than in the 1947 classic Miracle on 34th Street, where Edmund Gwenn delivers one of the most cherished portrayals of Kris Kringle ever captured on screen. His Santa is gentle, softly spoken and quietly mischievous, a man whose belief in kindness feels unshakable, even when surrounded by cynicism. What makes Miracle particularly remarkable is the way it tackles the growing commercialisation of Christmas. Set inside the real-life department stores Macy's and Gimbel's, the film uses the bustling retail world of post-war America to question whether the holiday still had space for genuine goodwill. Gwen's Kringle becomes a moral counterweight to corporate competition, sending customers to rival shops for better prices, challenging self-serving managers and reminding everyone that Christmas spirit shouldn't be something bought and sold. For a nation seeking comfort, his version of Santa represented decency at a time when those values felt newly precious. Almost half a century later, Richard Attenborough stepped into those iconic boots for the 1994 remake, a film designed to reintroduce Miracle on 34th Street to a new generation grappling with its own brand of cynicism. Attenborough's performance, warm and twinkling yet tinged with quiet vulnerability, offered a more grandfatherly Santa, one shaped by the gentler tones of 90s family cinema, but it held tightly to the emotional core, belief as an act of faith, trust and community. Critical reception was mixed. Many praised Attenborough's luminous performance as one of the finest modern Santas, whilst others felt the remake softened some of the original's sharper commentary on consumerism. Yet audiences embraced it, and the film has since become a Christmas staple in its own right. Let me know, which Miracle do you prefer, the 1947 original or the 1994 Attenborough remake? While Hollywood in the 40s and 50s was polishing Santa into a beacon of hope and sincerity, international cinema was heading down a wildly different path. The 1959 Mexican fantasy film Santa Claus, often called Santa Claus vs. the Devil, presents a Santa who is far more cosmic than cosy. In this surreal tale, Santa finds himself battling a demon named Pitch, sent by Lucifer to corrupt children during the holiday season. Surrounded by strange celestial machines, child helpers from around the world, and a workshop that feels part fairy tale and part science fiction, this Santa is transformed into a literal force of good in a metaphysical struggle. The film's vivid, dreamlike style and moral absolutism reflect the anxieties of the Cold War era, when stories of good and evil were often drawn in bold, imaginative strokes. It's a reminder that even at this early point, Santa was already being interpreted in ways that stretched far beyond Western tradition. Meanwhile, in American living rooms, television was shaping an entirely different side of Father Christmas. The rise of Rankin Bass productions in the 1960s brought audiences a series of animated specials that would come to define the holiday season for generations. Their animated specials became annual rituals, with The Little Drummer Boy, Frosty the Snowman and The Year Without a Santa Claus all elaborating on the world around Father Christmas, constructing a shared universe long before the concept of cinematic universes was fashionable. But it was Santa Claus's coming to town that left perhaps the most lasting impact. Here, Santa wasn't just a symbol, he was a full character with a past, a purpose, and crucially, a journey. This younger, red-headed Kris Kringle stood up to the oppressive authority. He challenged outdated rules and tried to bring joy to a community weighed down by rigidity and fear. His cheerful rebellion mirrored the cultural atmosphere of the late 60s and early 70s, when the idea of pushing back against the establishment resonated strongly with audiences. Rankin Bass reinvented Santa as a champion of personal freedom, kindness, and, ironically for a children's special, a subtle anti-authoritarian streak. As the 70s rolled into the 80s, Santa's presence on film grew larger and more fantastical. Budget increases, evolving effects technology, and the rise of blockbuster filmmaking created a new appetite for expansive Christmas storytelling. Nowhere is this shift clearer than in Santa Claus the movie from 1985. This ambitious production presented Santa with cinematic grandeur, showing his origin story whilst positioning him not just as a festive icon but as the centrepiece of a sprawling mythos involving elves headed by the mischievous Patch, played by Dudley Moore, flying reindeer, ancient magic and corporate greed as depicted by John Lithgow in a show-stealing performance as the evil toy maker BZ. David Huddlestone's portrayal offered a warm, gentle Santa, but the story around him was unmistakably shaped by the commercial culture of the decade. Whilst America was building Santa into an international icon, Britain offered its own, quieter, more reflective interpretation. In 1982, Channel 4 premiered the animated adaptation of Raymond Briggs' The Snowman. And though Santa appears only briefly, his presence is strikingly different from the glossy American portrayals of the time. His appearance in The Snowman adds a gentle burst of magic to an otherwise melancholic story. A decade later, Briggs' interpretation of Father Christmas took centre stage in the animated film Father Christmas in 1991, which follows Santa, voiced by British comedian Mel Smith, through his year leading up to Christmas, and reveals a far more human, earthy version of the character. This Santa manages a modest home and occasionally mutters about the chaos of the season, yet he still finds joy in the job. Briggs presents Father Christmas as a kind of everyman, a hard-working, slightly overburdened figure whose magic is as much about resilience and routine as it is about wonder. It's an interpretation steeped in British humour, practicality and warmth, and it remains one of the most distinctive portrayals of the era and a staple for many every Christmas morning across the UK. Meanwhile, comedy had also begun to explore Santa's image in new playful ways. Films such as Ernest Saves Christmas in 1988 presented a Santa at the end of his journey, searching for a successor before his magic ran out. It was a light-hearted take, but one that spoke to a deeper theme of generational renewal. This Santa was weary but wise, guiding a younger, more uncertain world toward the responsibility of carrying on the tradition. This idea, first hinted at in Ernest Saves Christmas, that Santa Claus is not a single immortal figure but a job that must be handed down, would become an increasingly popular concept. One of the most memorable explorations of this idea came with the Santa Claus in 1994. Tim Allen's portrayal of Scott Calvin, a cynical divorced father who accidentally knocks Santa from his roof and finds himself magically contracted into replacing him, launched an entire franchise about the physical, emotional and comedic transformation into St. Nick. The film recast Santa's role as a kind of magical employment contract, complete with fine print corporate-style rules and a North Pole that functions like a hyper-efficient business. It's a distinctly 90s idea, playful, bureaucratic and rooted in the anxieties and aspirations of the era's working parents. Another film that explores Christmas as a family business is Aardman's wonderfully inventive Arthur Christmas from 2011. Here Santa isn't a single man but the latest in a long generational line of Clauses, all operating a vast militarised sleigh cruiser supported by thousands of elves trained like Festive special forces. Arthur, the sweet-natured and often overlooked younger son, becomes the emotional core of the story, bursting with Christmas spirit yet overshadowed by his older brother whose obsession with efficiency and technology threatens to derail the holiday entirely. Their father, the retiring Santa, is more concerned with ceremony than substance, leaving Arthur as the only one truly focused on the joy that Christmas brings. Once again, Santa is presented not as an immortal being, but as a role to be filled and eventually inherited. Disney's Noel from 2019 embraces the Santa as a job concept even more directly. When Santa's son proves completely unsuited to the role, it falls to his daughter, Noel, played with bright, anxious charm by Anna Kendrick, to step into the red suit. Kendrick brings a delightful mix of compassion and nervous energy to the character, and the film blends traditional Christmas magic with contemporary themes of equality, self-discovery and breaking old expectations. It presents Santa not as a patriarchal figure, but as a title open to anyone with the heart, courage and kindness to carry it forward. It's a clear evolution of the succession narrative, echoing current conversations about gender, legacy and who gets to represent a cherished tradition. Another film that plays with the idea of Santa as part of a much larger family dynamic is Fred Claus from 2007. Here we meet Santa's older brother Fred, played with weary sarcasm by Vince Vaughn, a man who has spent his entire life living in the shadow of his saintly sibling. Paul Giamatti's Santa is overworked, overstressed and deeply human, managing the North Pole with the weight of centuries-old expectations on his shoulders. Fred Claus blends family comedy with workplace parody, poking fun at corporate style efficiency and the pressure of maintaining a flawless Christmas operation. It's a film that explores the strain of being the good one, the resentment of being overlooked, and the messy, very human relationships hidden behind the myth. In its own chaotic way, Fred Claus reinforces the idea that even Santa needs support, forgiveness, and the occasional family intervention. But cinema didn't stop at succession stories and the Claus family ties. It also had plenty of fun placing Santa in outlandish situations that threatened to derail Christmas altogether. One of the most memorable comedic detours came with Santa Who from 2000, in which Leslie Nielsen plays an amnesiac Santa who crash lands on Earth and forgets entirely who he is, leaving the holiday hanging by a thread as he wanders through the world, causing accidental chaos with his wide-eyed innocence. In Get Santa from 2014, Jim Broadbent gives a wonderful performance as a kind, slightly bewildered Santa who ends up in prison under the alias Mad Jimmy Claus, forcing ex-con Rafe Spall and his son to break him out before the time runs out. And in the Christmas Chronicles 2018, Kurt Russell plays a cooler, tougher Santa whose sleigh is accidentally crashed by two meddling siblings, leading them to help him retrieve the presents and save Christmas. All three films take delight in placing Santa on the brink of disaster, only to show how the magic of Christmas and the people who believe in him save the day. This era revealed a new truth about Father Christmas on screen. Santa could be fallible, flustered, unprepared, or blissfully optimistic in the face of chaos, yet still remain the steady heart of the season. Animation would take that same spirit and amplify it into something even more enchanting. With fewer limits on scale, spectacle, or imagination, animated films could explore the myth of Father Christmas in ways that live action never could. Robert Zemeckis' The Polar Express from 2004 used motion capture technology to create a dreamlike vision of Christmas Eve, depicting Santa as a serene, almost celestial presence at the centre of a child's journey toward belief. More recently, Klaus from 2019 redefined the mythology again, this time through handcrafted animation that blends warmth with modern storytelling. Here, Santa is not a magical being at all, but a lonely toy maker whose acts of kindness spark a legend. Other animated works like Rise of the Guardians from 2012 expanded Santa into a larger-than-life protector, a sword-wielding, tattooed guardian of wonder, reflecting the superhero-infused culture of the 2010s. And then there's Tim Burton and Henry Selick's The Nightmare Before Christmas from 1993, a film that occupies a unique space between whimsy and the macabre. Here, Santa, or Sandy Claus as Jack Skellington mistakenly calls him, is depicted as a sturdy, no-nonsense figure whose warmth and authority stand in stark contrast to the eerie inhabitants of Halloween Town. Though briefly imprisoned and nearly sacrificed to Oogie Boogie, this Santa remains unwavering in his purpose, bringing a grounding humanity to a film that dances between genres. The Nightmare Before Christmas acts as a bridge between the magical and the monstrous, gently foreshadowing the darker, more subversive Santa interpretations that would emerge in later decades. Just as animation elevated the magic of Christmas, another tradition emerged that would explore its shadows. Filmmakers began reimagining Santa and his mythology through a darker, more subversive lens. The cheerful icon of childhood became the starting point for horror, satire, and moral questioning. The result was a wave of films that treated Santa not as a jolly beacon of goodwill, but as a figure entangled in fear, folklore, moral judgment, and even violence. The most influential of these reimaginings arrived from Finland with Rare Exports in 2010, a film that digs deep into pre-modern, pre-Coca-Cola mythology. Here Santa is not a benevolent gift bringer, but an ancient, monstrous being. The film positions Santa as a cautionary tale rooted in harsh winter folklore. It's a stark reminder that Christmas legends were not always comforting, and that the figure of Father Christmas has long had a shadow to him. Hollywood's answer to this darker turn came in the form of Krampus from 2015, a horror comedy that pulls from Central European folklore. The film imagines the creature who comes when the spirit of Christmas is lost. Krampus arrives as punishment for a family's cynicism, dragging them into a twisted, snowbound nightmare of demonic toys and grotesque holiday cheer. It's a film that weaponises the imagery of Christmas to reflect modern anxieties about fractured families, consumer meltdown, and the loss of genuine connection. Another submersive take is Fat Man from 2020, where Mel Gibson plays a grizzled, battle-worn Santa struggling to keep his workshop financially afloat amid declining Christmas morale. Far from the twinkling grandfather of tradition, this Santa is tired, frustrated, and forced into brutal confrontation with a hired assassin sent by a spoilt child. It's a wickedly cynical film, part black comedy, part pulp thriller that imagines Santa as a blue-collar worker on the brink, surviving in a world that no longer values what he represents. Santa's Sleigh from 2005 transforms Santa into a literal demon on a killing spree, gleefully tearing apart the holiday with B-movie excess. Meanwhile, films like A Christmas Horror Story from 2015 pit Santa against zombie elves, teasing the boundaries between festive myth and outright genre mayhem. Violent Night from 2022 reimagines him as a bruised, battle-hardened warrior dragged into a bloody Christmas Eve rescue mission, a full-blown action hero wrapped in red velvet. Is this shift a sign of the times? Is this how we've evolved or devolved? Have audiences become so fascinated by horror and violence that even the joy of Christmas and the warmth of Santa are no longer sacred? And yet, Santa endures because he can be both the light and the dark. So as we wrap up this cinematic journey through sleigh bells, snowstorms and centuries of reinvention, I'd love to know which Santa is your favourite. Did I miss any portrayals you think deserve a place on this list? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this exploration of Father Christmas on film, remember to like, subscribe and share. And until next time, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.